If you're a vinyl fan, you got to check out the brand new film Vinyl Nation. And I'm joined by the director producers of the film, Kevin Smokler, Christopher Boone. Gentlemen, I got to thank you so much for the time and congratulations on such a fantastic documentary.
We sure appreciate that, Wes. Thank you for watching it.
Yeah, and thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Let's start here, Kevin. What was exactly the catalyst of the project? Why make a documentary about the love of vinyl, if you will?
I'm kind of a documentary nut. I've loved documentaries since I saw The Thin Blue Line in high school. And I was pretty convinced at that time every documentary I liked was about like the murder of a police officer or something, because I saw a lot of those at that time. But so I'd always wanted to make a documentary, even though filmmaking wasn't my primary bag, and it was Chris's. Chris and I met in what was then the film program in college, which was what, Chris, like a closet full of like second-rate equipment and, a couple of editing decks and basically a lot of class credit internships you could pull together, that didn't really count as classes, but you could call as A's on a transcript. And we met in that college film program, which is apparently a lot more elaborate now, and got back in touch about 5-6 years ago. And he had made some great movies that I saw, and I was on book tour in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he lives. We do not live in the same place, but we made this movie together. That's the glory of the 21st century. And I said, we did a couple of events together in Albuquerque, RE, my books. And I said, we work really well together. Like, we should like make something. Like, we can't like sit over each other's shoulders and write a book together. I mean, maybe we could, it'd just be uncomfortable. But, I said, maybe we should make a movie together. And I've always wanted to make a documentary, and I write nonfiction books, so I don't know anything about actors and telling screenplays and telling stories that aren't real. And he goes, do you have any ideas for a documentary? I said, exactly one, which is why 10 years after the first comeback of records was reported, is it still around? And what does it mean to us? Because like when we started talking about the comeback of vinyl in 2018, vinyl had been coming back since about 2008, 2009. So if we were going to make a movie about that, there was no like, hey, did you hear? Like this new thing is happening, because it was not a new thing when we started talking about it. And therefore, we're like, okay, well, we're going to make a documentary about vinyl. I had a name. I had Vinyl Nation as the name, but that was it. And I said, well, what is it? And Chris was like, well, it's probably about like, what does this all mean 10 years later? And how do we account for this particular comeback of an old technology, of a new way with an old technology of consuming popular culture? And I said, that's great. And we both went back to our respective home places and started talking on the phone like once a week. And we did that for like 6 months until finally we were like, sounds like we got something here. Maybe we got to like get past the talking part and get on to the doing part.
And usually that's how it goes. It takes, I don't think people quite understand exactly how long it takes, no matter what the film. It takes quite a while to get it done. So, Chris, what about storyboarding such a project? Because when you watch Vinyl Nation, there are so many different stories themselves told within it. So, how do you piece it all together to go, okay, this is how we're going to start and roll the whole thing out?
Yeah, when Kevin and I were doing our research, and then we kind of came up with what we thought the outline was going to be, we put together essentially album tracks when we were in pre-production, and there were just different subject areas we wanted to cover. And at that point in time, we'd identified, I think, most of our interview subjects too. So we had a pretty good idea of who we wanted to talk to on camera, who we thought would give a good interview, and where would they fit on our album, so to speak. And so every album track had questions that we wanted to ask them on camera. And if we thought they belonged in a track, they would get certain questions. And then if they had a specific story we wanted them to tell, then they're going to have their own story. And so we had our initial idea of how we wanted it to go, but it wasn't until after we filmed everything. With a documentary, like there's really no, for our type of documentary, it's not like there's any narration, so there's no real actual writing. So the writing is the editing process. And so when we handed over our footage to our editors, Jason Welling and David Fabello, they really helped us kind of shape the story. So they looked at everything fresh, not having been in any of the interviews, and they started to pull together what they thought were some interesting scenes or some stories. And then they came to us with a proposal for an outline, which was a little bit more chronological in order, and we weren't so interested in telling a history lesson. So we kind of took their initial outline and our initial outline, and we sort of merged the two together. And that was the beginning, I say, like of a rough cut. And then it was just weeks and weeks and weeks of just putting note cards up on a wall and just moving them around and fine tuning everything and getting down from the monstrous, 3.5 hour ordeal of a cut down to a nice, tight, nimble 90 minutes that would hopefully also, pull you along story wise. But for somebody who I came from a narrative world and not from documentaries. That was an interesting process for me. I'm so used to writing my scripts, directing them, and then working with an editor. So you have the script as the blueprint. And here it's, okay, we think we have an idea, but let's see what actually works. And then which interviews actually merge well with one another. So we're obviously cutting across a variety of different interviews and having people just by chance telling the same story, and to be able to cut in between those stories was actually really fascinating in the editing process.
And there are a lot of stories that intertwine. You want to go back to that narrative thing. One of the reviews I read about it said, it's more like a conversation than a documentary, welcoming and organic. Was that the plan from the start, was to go ahead and really just let the documentary itself tell the story, the people tell the stories? Chris.
Yeah. Our initial intent was like, let's have the people of Vinyl Nation tell the story of Vinyl Nation. And so we didn't have any intention of doing any sort of narration. We talked about it in post as we were pulling things together, but it didn't really feel right. Organic, I think, is the best word to use there. We wanted these people to help us tell that story. And that's also another reason why Kevin and I early in the process decided, let's not have famous people as our interview subjects. There are some people that, if you're deep in the music, you may recognize some of the people, but it's not your usual suspects. Like Jack White is not an interview subject in our film. He appears in archival footage. But we wanted the people of Vinyl Nation to tell the story. Kevin, is there anything else along those lines that I'm missing?
No, I think you got it. Like it was clear to us, like we had topics that we wanted to cover. We wanted to show record stores and how records were made, and parents and kids being into vinyl and young people being into vinyl. I think we had a better sense of what we didn't want than what we did at the beginning. Like we didn't want it to be a 90-minute, history lesson starting from, like the invention of polyvinyl plastic up to today. We didn't want it to be a nostalgia trip. So we didn't want it to be just people who had vinyl as kids and were now grownups. And we didn't have anything pointedly political to say about how vinyl is better than some other way of listening to music, other than we thought it was cool, and we liked, as people, everybody who we had interviewed for the movie, and we thought you might too. So I think if we had anything to say from the end of it, it's just like vinyl people all have something in common, and even though they seem very different from one another, they seem to relate on a certain level just because of this flat black plastic way of listening to music. And we thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, definitely how it all brings everybody together. I love Record Store Day. I've done shopping at many of them and seeing everyone come together. You don't know each other, but you're all there for one common cause, and it's really cool to see everybody get together for that. Kevin, talking about the interviews, there's one, I can't remember the woman's name, but she's a DJ, and she cries at the end of the film. You get up to hug her. Some of those interviews, what would you say would be one of the most interesting interviews you did during the filming of all the interviews?
That woman's name is Ashley Ann Krigbaum. She goes by DJ Wham Bam Ashley Ann. She is a podcast producer for her day job in Los Angeles, and then DJs, travels all over the country DJing, mostly focused on playing 45s of vintage soul and northern soul music. So like really carved out a DJ practice for herself just using records. That's in the movie because Ashley Ann and I were friends before we filmed the movie, and I just saw a friend of mine crying, and that's why I stood up. We decided early on to leave it in. That was the first week of shooting, and Chris has said that he called home after the first week of shooting, after that moment happened, and said to his wife, like, I think we have something here. And I think it was the first moment during shooting where we're like, I think we're really on to something special. as far as all of the interviews go, we shot in 14 cities around the United States. We talked to lots of different kinds of people of all ages, races, genders, and musical tastes. And I think like the ones, I don't know if I could pick a favorite. You know, we have an 11-year-old kid who's now 14, who we talked to, named Elliot, who was great, and a last-minute addition to our film. We talked to Claudia Sands, the founder of the Chulita Vinyl Club, which is an all-female Latin American DJ collective, now based in 7 cities in the southwestern and western United States. We got to talk. We just got to talk to a lot of great people, and none of them were famous people, but they were all like amazing representative citizens of this thing we called Vinyl Nation.
And picking the people that you obviously casted out that net to get for the interviews, Chris, how did you end up picking those folks to be into the film? Because wasn't there like something like 40, 45 folks that you interviewed for it?
Yeah, I think we had 45 specific interviews, and that doesn't count any of the on-the-fly interviews we did on a record store day or at Austin Record Convention. And so a lot of the people we initially found through our networks, a lot of them really through Kevin's network at first, and then most people were maybe a degree or two separated from us through our networks. We let people know that we were working on this project, and if they knew anyone who was in the vinyl, and we would put out specific calls, say like, we're looking for parents who are getting into vinyl with their kids, sharing records with their kids. We're looking for young people who are into records now, who didn't have music in a physical format in any other way until records. And then we did our own research. We wanted to talk to record store owners, and so we made a concerted effort to find women who own record stores, because we wanted to show people that high fidelity is maybe a little bit of an anachronism at this point in time. So with those efforts, we then also realized we needed to talk to some record labels, some pressing plants. So some of it was cold calls. Kevin went to the Making Vinyl conference, I think in 2018, met a lot of people there. A number of those people ended up making their way into our film, like Karen Kelleher at Gold Rush Vinyl, I know in Austin, Texas, came through there. And so just doing a little bit of legwork, we were able to find all those people. We did talk to everybody, almost everybody, on the phone before we actually put them on camera. There were a few people, there were some last minute additions, so we didn't know how well it would go ultimately, but we had a pretty good sense of who we're going to talk to. I know there's some filmmakers that say don't interview people ahead of putting them on camera. We kind of wanted to know the story that we were going to tell. And so by talking to people on the phone, we knew if they would interview well, and if they had an anecdote or a specific take on vinyl that we thought was going to work well with the film, we wanted to make sure that we captured it later on camera. And that definitely worked out for us, because we'd be at interviews and Kevin would do all the interviewing, and then he would step back after a little bit and say, is there anything we're missing? And we could go back to our notes and say, oh, right, we need this person to tell this story. So let's go back, roll a little bit more footage, and kind of get that story on camera. And by and large, all those people still, if they had told us the story once, it was still quite fresh on camera that time around. So that's the only thing you might lose if you pre-interview people. But all in all, that way, like I said, you can't write ahead of time. That way we had a pretty good sense of what we were going to capture, and then we had to just distill it down into the 90-minute film that you see now.
Well, was there any happy accidents that occurred from those interviews? I'll start with Kevin on this.
Jesus, I'm sure there are plenty. I'm not remembering them specifically. I mean, we didn't know we were going to be filming at the Austin Record Convention until the schedule was completely set. And then at the last minute, Nathan Hanners, who runs the whole convention, along with 4 or 5 trusted lieutenants, kind of poked his head up from the morass of getting the convention running for that year, and answered us and said, yeah, sure, if you guys want to come. And so we had to cancel a planned stop at the Great Sweat Records in Miami to go to the Austin Record Convention. We didn't think we were going to be there. And then when we interviewed Jessa Zaper Gray, who is a music industry veteran based in Southern California, she asked to meet us at Stoughton Printing, just south of Los Angeles. And we said, yeah, sure, no problem. Not realizing quite naively that we were going to a printing factory where they printed record jackets, and that might be really nice to have in the movie. And so Jessa arrived and was all set for us to talk to her. And then we said, do you mind if we take a minute or 40 and go and film the record jackets coming off the line? And so that wasn't supposed to be in the movie either, and it was mostly due to the good fortune of us scheduling that interview there, and Jess's generosity with her time, and saying, and giving us a little time to go and film in there too. So those are the big ones I can think of. Chris, you got any others? Any others come to mind?
Yeah, I just have a few like smaller ones. This is a kind of a tight-knit community when it comes to the industry. So we're interviewing John Vanderslice in the Bay Area at the time, and just without prompting, he goes off on a tangent about Gary Sahlstrom at Quality Record Pressing. And we were going to go to Salina, Kansas to interview Gary because he's this incredible plater, and he's going to be moving to a new pressing plant that Vinyl Me Please is opening up just outside of Denver soon to get that up and going. But we didn't say to John, like, hey, do you know Gary or whatever? So he basically gives us like this awesome intro for Gary. So it's just a natural transition in the film. So that was cool. The one that really that I really liked was, and I think shows how more alike we are than different in just in life in general, but that came through in the film is we had two people. We had Rosalie, who's a woman who lives in Harlem, and she, at the time we interviewed her, was a vice president for the Ms. Foundation, and then we talked to Cutmaster Kurt, who is a DJ well known amongst DJ fans, and also has done a ton of remixes as well. And they both tell the exact same story about looking for a place to live, and their spouses, telling them they're both concerned about where they're going to put their record collections, and their spouses say, oh, this is a great space for your record collection to be on display, or we wouldn't buy a house if we couldn't put your record collection on display. And we're talking thousands of records that they each have. And that was a huge deal that neither of them had prompted their spouses, to say. And the fact that they both told us those exact same stories, like, that's magic. And so to be able to cut between those two stories and see these people from very different walks of life have the same experience with records, that was super special. So it was things like that were great. And then, like Kevin said, sometimes you get some last minute things. Stephen Thompson of NPR Music, we just happened to somehow connect with him while we were in Baltimore. And Kevin tells me, hey, Chris, Stephen can do an interview tomorrow, and can we get down to Silver Spring, Maryland and do it? And I'm like, well, we're flying home tomorrow, but I guess so. And it was a fantastic interview. And then Stephen's been such a fantastic champion for our film ever since. So I'm grateful both for the content and just getting to know Stephen as a human being. That was serendipity.
Going back to the comment about the houses and finding places to get to vinyl, my wife saw that spot in the film with me, and she looked over at me. She's like, yeah, find that spot. Let's move the stuff. Any chance. Don't get me wrong. I love her. She loves me and all the records that we have. But she's like, every time we move, she's like the bane of my existence.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And we talk about that in the film too. Logan Melissa, she's moving the records. You can only convince a friend maybe once to help you move once they realize you have a large record collection. After that, forget it.
No, and after the age of 30, hire movers, because your friends aren't doing it for a piece of pizza and 2 beers. It ain't happening.
Way. They might take a crate. They might take a crate of records with them. So.
Yeah. Plan on your records getting stolen after the age of 30 if you try and do that.
The film, you shot it over 2018, correct?
2019. Spring of 2019, starting at the third week of March and ending at the beginning of June.
So we have the pandemic, and that obviously messes up the release and everything like that. You've adjusted now, but you've had all that time to have the film once it was final produced and everything like that. Have you ever gone back and looked at that finished product and go, maybe we should have changed this or that? We'll start with Chris.
No. I think it's easier with a documentary than a narrative film when it's like your own writing and you're directing all the actors. Like, all I can see are the mistakes that I made, and there's no time or money to go back and change it. When it's other people in their own words, it's a lot easier for me to sit back and not take it personally. And I just feel like we worked really hard with Jason and David, our editors, to get it down to exactly the right moments. So there wasn't really even anything that hit the cutting room floor that I felt like, oh, like if we could only have that. I mean, if anything, there's nothing to put in, but there are a few people that were just really wonderful to get to meet. The one that comes to mind for me the most is Jean-Luc Gaudry, who's the owner of Headline Records in Los Angeles. Like if you're ever in LA, even if you're not into punk music, you got to go to Headline Records. It's a specialty store for punk music, but Jean-Luc is the sweetest guy, and he'll definitely find something that you're into, even if that's not your genre. And I just wish we had more of him in the film. He's just kind of barely in there. And it was just, again, the anecdotes and everything like that just didn't quite fit into the narrative flow. There was more of him in the rough cuts, and you had to make some sacrifices there. But ultimately, the story that we have is one I'm super happy with. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, we've been fortunate that the film has played at a number of film festivals, and in a few cases, Chris and I have gotten to see it in person. And you never know, like you make the thing and you never know what people are going to like and respond to, and what they're not, and what you think is an incredible moment and just kind of whizzes on by and people don't respond to. Um, so I guess that means that if we were to sit and watch it with an audience again, there'd probably be moments where I was like, we could have done something there that would have elicited the response we were actually looking for. But like, it's just not. It's like the stock market. It's not something you can accurately predict. You just hope that at the end, you get some sort of reaction, and those come in lots of different forms that indicates that people feel like they made a good choice coming to see your movie. And the first time I got to see it in person was at a great film festival called the Deep in the Heart Film Festival in Waco, Texas, who were dogged about us being at the festival, but was very flattering and very nice of them. And so we said, sure. And I was sort of sent as an emissary for our movie to go to that festival last July. And it played at this beautiful theater in downtown Waco. And the movie did its thing and finished. And before the lights came up, the entire crowd kind of leapt to its feet and in applause. And I was sitting there with my best friend from graduate school who lived in Austin and was kind enough to drive in for the day to Waco. And I just burst into tears because I had hoped I'd hoped people liked what we did. I'd hoped they, people didn't run for the exits or something like that. But, I was expecting a respectful, that was nice. And the lights come up and then you have the Q&A and people ask a few basic questions. You go on about your business. But, no, that was really special and unexpected, and I don't know if we'll ever get an opportunity like that again, but I'd see the movie 1,000 more times if we felt like it made people happy in that way.
It's out there digitally. Is there plans for an actual physical release? Because we talked about vinyl being physical. Do we see the movie being physical down the line?
We actually did a limited physical release for Record Store Day last summer. It was back when they had moved Record Store Day back because of the pandemic, and it was a June release. So we did 1,000 copies only for Record Store Day, and we did it in special packaging. So we were like, if it's a movie about records, why not do cool packaging? So we did a 12 by 12 gatefold as if it were an album, and we did the whole foil stamping on the front, and we hand numbered it because why not? So every single copy is its own unique hand numbered copy. And we had a company, Ingram Entertainment, who does distribution of records and DVDs and stuff like that, had reached out to us during the pandemic after having seen it, the film, through a fundraiser we had done for record stores, and said, hey, we want to help you guys if you ever want to release it. So they were really great to work with on that project, and they work with independent record stores. So they were able to help us through that whole rigmarole, and we had made friends with the Record Store Day national organization as well. So it was great to kind of connect with them through that as well. So we sold out of that run. That doesn't mean it's not available, but you have to look really hard. I think there's still some copies floating around out there at record stores. We were keeping track for a while, but it got to the point where it's so few copies that you just have to go and look. You might find them on eBay. I don't know. Or again, contact your local record store. If they participate in Record Store Day, they might have a copy hanging around. But that's the only physical copy we've done. We talked about it since, but I think we're just going to leave it to that limited structure, and you got to go digging if you want to find it, like any good record. So
I love the phrase digging. Record fans do that so much. I have one friend who, going back to those who you talk about in the film, because the hardcore collector, there are those. I don't know about you. I'm just a casual fan. I'll buy what I like. I listen to it. I'm not buying to put it up on the shelf and display it. But like I had a buddy of mine just recently tell me, he's like, "Oh yeah, I bought this Police box set. It's out of print. I love it." I was like, "How much did you spend?" He's like, "I'm not going to tell you because I didn't even tell my wife because it's just that expensive." I'm like, "Dude,
Yeah.
really? You know she's going to kill you." Well, yeah, she's still angry about my Record Store Day of purchases as well. I'm like, how often in the film did you find that with folks that would spend a lot of money? Because there's one scene, I believe, from the Houston one, the collection part of, I can't remember the actual like convention vendor thing that you went to, where somebody dropped $400 on a single record.
Yeah, that was at the Austin Record Convention,
Austin,
and that is, I mean, that's common. Like people, records have an inherent, because there is as big a market for used records as there are for new records. I mean, don't quote me on that, but spiritually there is. It means there's an inherent treasure hunt aspect to finding records, and treasure chests are expensive. They're filled with gold and precious jewels, and they're expensive. We don't get much into that. I don't think it was a question Chris and I were particularly interested in, and B, we sort of didn't want the movie to be a study of sort of the economics of vinyl, which we didn't find that interesting, and B, we felt kind of missed the point. Like, vinyl is not. There's some amazing records out there, and there are a couple of really great books about like the rare multi-$1,000 record and the search for that, the same way you search for a Picasso or something. But overall, like, we were more interested in vinyl as an inclusive rather than an exclusive activity, and way of listening to music. So that's why we didn't talk too much in the movie about, oh, well, what's your white whale? What's the one that you absolutely have to have? And maybe it's just because like I don't have any good stories. It may have been just for selfish reasons that we didn't end up including that in the movie. I don't have any good stories about a white whale, and a record I've always wanted. At any one time, I have 30 to 50 records that I could stand to buy, which is a great thing, because it means like I'm probably never going to be let down by not finding that white whale. But it also means like there's no point where I'm like, things are good, I don't need any more.
Well, I do appreciate in the film that you do ask the hardest question of all time: is vinyl better than? And the hilarity that ensues following the answers that come from people, because some of them can't answer it's better than whatever, because there's a blank right after that, or a dot dot dot. Chris, going to you, was that like planned going into the film? Like, you just wanted to find that out?
Yeah, I mean, the question we would get asked when we were just doing the research, and I would tell people, they said, "What are you working on?" I said, "Oh, I'm researching a potential documentary on the resurgence of vinyl records." And then the very next question someone had asked me, like, at once I would say, like, "Yes, and I have records as well." They go, "Well, does vinyl really sound better?" And as people point out immediately in our film, like, better than what? There's never like a then what. So we're comparing it to CDs, we're comparing it to tapes, 8 tracks, as somebody says, MP3s. And what so it was planned. We asked that of everyone. And what I loved was the spectrum of answers we got. And also what was so great about it was, I think you got answers you didn't expect from certain people. Again, John Vanderslice, who at the time we interviewed him in his studio at Tiny Telephone, which is built on all analog equipment, including analog tape. It's all analog from start to finish, with the idea being then you would then take it from there to turn it into a record. He's the one who says, I think, that a terribly made record, he uses more colorful language, a terribly made record can sound a lot worse than a really well produced cassette, and cassettes are way cheaper to produce. So he's not saying like it's vinyl or nothing. He's like, if you're going to spend all this money, you better have awesome music to record first. Like, not just the quality of recording, like you better come up with great songs and a lot of them to put on an album. Otherwise, why are you wasting your money? So that kind of stuff was really fascinating. As Kevin and I had said to other people before, we don't believe there's a right answer to that question. And I think that's evident from the variety of answers that we get. I think for me personally, I end up toward the answers that we kind of finish on. It's like, records are right for certain times and places and maybe certain types of music that I'm into. But I listen to Spotify all the time. Like, I audition music on Spotify. If someone tells me about a new artist, I go check it out and listen. And if I've listened to it enough, I go, okay, I should own this. And if it's available on vinyl, that's probably the way I want to own it. And I like listening to albums more than I like listening to individual songs. So for me, that's a natural fit to listen to records. And I put them on when I'm cooking dinner. So the music is happening while I'm cooking and I'm paying more attention to the music than I am to the meal that I'm actually making. But that's the ritual aspect of it that I really enjoy. So, the answer is, I guess, it depends. What about you, Kevin?
I'm forgetting what the initial question is.
Does vinyl sound better than?
Oh, well, I don't know. Like, I mean, maybe. Like it's like. First of all, I don't have good enough ears to actually know the difference. I know, like for me, it's more fun. Like it's just more fun to pull like a giant piece of plastic out of a beautiful, piece of cardboard and put it on your turntable and sit in your home surrounded by the people you love, listening to music you love. That's not the only time music enters our lives. We listen to music in the car or at the gym or walking somewhere, or and vinyl doesn't work in places like that. So then that's cool too. I think for both of us, and probably for most of the people in our movie, like vinyl is sort of where you end up. Vinyl is the Hall of Fame. Like the stuff that is most important to you, you end up purchasing on record. And the stuff that like can you can either take or leave, or is good for a particular moment and not for another one, you may leave as an MP3, or you may just let it come into your life when it does. I'd say overall it was like really important for us, like that Vinyl Nation not be like a series of pronouncements and edicts, like vinyl sounds better, this band is better than that band, this stereo is better than that stereo. Like we were after kind of what records open up to you and not what they close off to you. And so I think we very deliberately refrained from making such pronouncements. A, because they're boring to listen to, and B, because they weren't ours to make. Like when you're making a documentary, you may have an idea of what you want to say, but ultimately it's the subject that tells you what the story is.
And I appreciate the fact that you don't try to convert people to vinyl. It's more about the community. And like, I'm a vinyl fan, wife not so much, but you're not trying to convert those. If I'm coming in and watching it, I'm enjoying the story and the community vibe of just knowing all about these folks. And that's what I got from it. I don't know what the full takeaway is supposed to be, but that's what I got out of it.
And you're right. We're not trying to convert anyone. That is definitely not our intention. And yet we have heard stories of people we have converted who have been some reason for how pulled along to watch this documentary, and they weren't in the records. And then they go, I think I kind of want to get a turntable and buy some records.
There you go. Well, gentlemen, I both appreciate your time to talk about this fantastic film that you have. Before we end this, just real quickly, let's start over with Kevin. Do you have an upcoming project or anything you can talk about that's going to be next for you?
I've got a book I'm under contract to do about women film directors, which I'm very excited about. Chris and I have begun talking about what our next thing is. We're kind of at the stage we were 4 years ago when we were like, let's just get on the phone once in a while and see if this becomes anything. I think we took away from this that we enjoy working together and we work well together, and it's provided, and the success of Vinyl Nation has provided us with some opportunities we frankly didn't think we would have. So we're trying to make good on those now. I think it's gonna be a little while before it's clear what the thing is that we do next, but it is brewing. Let's just say that.
All right. What about you, Chris, outside of the next project for the two of you?
Well, yeah, just like Kevin said, that's a brewing. And then I always just try to keep writing on my own narrative projects. They take a lot longer to get off the ground. So it's good to have. I think it's also great to collaborate with somebody because then you also feel responsible to somebody. That always helps to move things forward. And if you don't feel like you're making any progress on maybe your own personal projects, you're turning over to this one. Say, okay, what is Kevin looking for me to accomplish in the next few days here? I got to get through that. And together we're kind of pushing each other to move forward. What I'm excited about this time around is, like Kevin said, he had absolutely one idea for a documentary and I had no ideas for a documentary. We don't know exactly what our next project's going to be, but we have multiple ideas that we are interested in exploring. So we're kind of at that fun phase of just going and doing deep dives into things without spending any money.
The always fun part.
Yes,
Never
yes.
spending the money.
So once we realize we've gone too far down a rabbit hole, we'll then have to figure out, okay, can we turn this rabbit hole into the next documentary?
Well, cool. I'm looking forward to that. Again, appreciate the current documentary, Vinyl Nation. It was fantastic. And gentlemen, thank you so much again for the time.
We appreciate that, Wes. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. Appreciate it.